So I want you, our listener, to just kind of picture a living room in Japan.
Right, like back in the Showa era.
Exactly, the Showa era. So we're talking, post-war decades stretching from like the late 50s straight through the 80s.
Yeah, it's a very specific vibe.
It really is. So you're sitting cross-legged on a tatami mat, and you're positioned right in front of one of those incredibly heavy, uh, boxy cathode ray tube TVs.
Oh, yeah, the ones where the screen is all heavily curved at the edges.
Right. And the colors are maybe a bit blown out, or they have that distinct analog warmth to them.
Yeah, that fuzzy, nostalgic look.
Exactly. And you are just completely absorbed in watching an anime. But what you're watching isn't a cheerful romp.
Not at all.
No, you're watching a character, maybe the young protagonist you really identify with, just getting absolutely ruthlessly bullied.
I mean, systematically tormented.
Yeah, beaten down, socially isolated, and humiliated by an enemy who has like absolutely zero redeeming qualities.
Just a deeply, profoundly unlikable character radiating pure malice.
Right. And if you grew up with those shows, you undoubtedly remember how incredibly uncomfortable that felt as a kid.
Oh, your stomach would literally tie up in knots.
It really would. It was this genuine, unavoidable feeling of deep unpleasantness.
Visceral, really. You weren't passively watching, you're enduring it.
Exactly. But here is the hook for today's deep dive. I want you to hold on to that very specific, deeply uncomfortable feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Because it's actually incredibly important.
It is, because according to the stack of personal essays we're unpacking today, that feeling of sitting in front of the TV and feeling miserable about a fictional bully, well, it might actually be the skeleton key to your psychological survival.
In the real adult world, yeah.
Right. So today we are exploring a really fascinating, highly specific topic. We're breaking down exactly what this author thinks about why those cruel, mean enemies were absolutely essential in Showa era anime and dramas.
It's a deeply philosophical argument and honestly pretty provocative.
It really challenges a lot of modern parenting and storytelling norms, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. The author is presenting a thesis that these harsh, sometimes shockingly violent enemies weren't just cheap entertainment.
They were actual developmental tools.
Load-bearing ones, yeah. The core of their argument is that we actually need these toxic, unapologetically mean-spirited villains.
And on the flip side, the modern trend of sanitized entertainment, media stripped of its harshness or its poison, as the author calls it.
Right, the poison.
That it might actually be setting today's children up for complete emotional devastation later on.
It's a wild premise, but the psychological framework they use to back it up is incredibly solid.
Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions about the author's own morality, we do need to clarify something right up front.
Yes, very important point. The author explicitly says they absolutely despise real-world bullying.
They hate it with a passion. Real-world violence, malice, they detest all of it.
Exactly. But it's precisely because they hate real-world cruelty so much that they're making this impassioned argument for fictional cruelty.
It's like they're arguing for a psychological inoculation.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. It sounds counterintuitive at first. Like, why would someone who hates bullying want kids to simulate the pain of being bullied?
Right. Why subject them to that?
But it's all about human resilience. It's about developing emotional antibodies.
No, I like that. Emotional antibodies.
Yeah, and the profound danger of raising kids in these curated information bubbles where they're completely shielded from the darker aspects of human nature.
Because if they're shielded, their minds don't know how to process a real threat.
Exactly. The absence of fictional threats leaves the mind woefully unprepared for real ones.
So I want to look at the actual rogues gallery of Showa entertainment the author brings up just to illustrate this point.
Let's do it.
Because we aren't talking about modern, complex, morally gray anti-heroes here.
No, not the misunderstood villains with tragic backstories.
Right, the ones that make you want to empathize with them and like cosplay as them at a convention.
Not at all.
The author lists a very specific, almost traumatizing roster of bullies and rivals from their childhood.
The heavy hitters.
Yeah, we're talking about Neil and Eliza from the classic series Candy Candy.
Oh, they were awful.
Truly awful. And Kyoko Otoa and Miki Koda.
Right.
We have Mr. X from the wrestling anime Tiger Mask.
Terrifying.
Miss Rottenmeier from Heidi, Girl of the Alps. She was so strict.
Deeply intimidating for a kid.
And of course, The quintessential playground bully,
Huh.
Jean from Doraemon.
Right. The author's analysis of their own childhood reaction to these specific characters is super revealing.
How so?
Well, it highlights a fundamental shift in how we consume media. The author freely admits that their young heart felt genuinely unpleasant while watching these characters.
Unpleasant, that's the exact word.
Yeah, there was absolutely no joy in watching Neil and Eliza systematically gaslight and torment Candy.
None. She was an orphan.
Exactly. And there was no secret, edgy admiration for Mr. X's institutionalized sadism in Tiger Mask either.
Right, the child viewer wasn't confused about their emotional state.
No, these characters were engineered from the ground up to be despised.
And they succeeded perfectly.
They really did. They elicited this powerfully negative emotional response.
Mhm.
The kid watching felt the injustice, the crushing unfairness,
The sharp sting of malice just transmitting straight through the TV screen.
right into their living room.
But see, I'm struggling with this on a practical level.
How do you mean?
Well, school is hard enough for a kid, you know. Growing up is inherently confusing and stressful.
Oh, absolutely.
So, why on earth would I want my child to sit down and voluntarily feel miserable during their 30 minutes of free time?
Right. The protective instinct.
Exactly. Entertainment is supposed to be an escape, a way to decompress. It feels almost cruel to intentionally inject stress into their leisure time.
I get that. Shouldn't we protect them from feeling bad?
Right, when they're just trying to relax and watch a cartoon.
But see, that instinct to protect is exactly what the author is critiquing here.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The discomfort you're identifying, it isn't a side effect of the entertainment. It is the primary active ingredient.
The active ingredient. Wow.
Yeah, the author argues that reducing entertainment to mere escape severely kneecaps its utility.
Because feeling bad while watching these shows establishes an emotional baseline.
Exactly. The author actually uses the word poison to describe these toxic narrative elements.
Poison. That's a strong word.
It is. But experiencing this poison in a strictly fictional, safely contained setting serves a vital developmental purpose.
So it's a controlled exposure.
Precisely. By removing the discomfort to ensure the child is always happy and relaxed, sanitized media completely misses the brief window of opportunity to teach the brain.
To teach it how to process and survive negative emotions.
Yeah, to categorize that feeling so they know what it is later.
So the narrative friction isn't a flaw, it's a feature.
A very deliberate feature.
It's almost like the author is suggesting that feeling bad in front of the TV is the psychological equivalent of going to the gym.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like you're intentionally subjecting your muscles to stress and micro tears so they grow back denser and stronger.
You don't go to the gym to relax.
You go to build capacity.
Yeah.
So if we follow that logic, we have to look at what happens to a generation when we actively, systematically remove all the heavyweights from the gym.
Which is what modern media is doing.
We've transitioned away from these vicious bullies toward villains who are just misguided,
Right, or conflicts that get neatly resolved with a quick, empathetic conversation.
where everyone just validates each other's feelings at the end.
Which leads directly to the author's central operating metaphor, the sterile room crisis.
The sterile room, in Japanese, the term they use is mukinshitsu, right?
Yes, Mukinshitsu. The author is deeply concerned about recent anime and live action dramas, specifically their overwhelming lack of poison.
Their lack of harshness or genuine threat.
Exactly. The argument posits that modern media constructs a psychological sterile room.
Just like a biological one.
Right. Biologically, if you raise a child in a completely sanitized, hyper clean environment, their physical immune system never encounters everyday pathogens.
So these Showa era villains act like an emotional vaccine.
That's exactly it.
Because a vaccine introduces a dead or heavily weakened version of a virus into your system.
It doesn't kill you, but it teaches your white blood cells what the enemy looks like.
So by the time the real virus shows up, your body already has the blueprint to destroy it.
Yes, and in this framework, modern media is essentially refusing to vaccinate kids emotionally,
They're keeping the kids entirely out of the dirt.
which means the very first time they encounter a real world emotional germ, they're defenseless.
Like a manipulative coworker or a toxic boss or a jealous friend.
They have zero antibodies, and it absolutely destroys them.
That is such a stark warning.
The biological analogy maps perfectly onto the psychological reality.
Mhm.
When kids are raised without regular exposure to fictional malice,
Without seeing characters act out of pure, unadulterated spite.
right, or jealousy or cruelty on screen, their emotional immune systems just never boot up.
They just remain completely dormant.
Yeah. And the author makes a highly specific extrapolation here, pointing directly to modern family dynamics.
Oh, the only child factor.
Exactly. The only child phenomenon became increasingly prevalent in Japan post Showa.
Right. The author warns that if an individual, especially an only child who is raised in a somewhat spoiled, highly attentive, loving
A
environment,
very sheltered environment.
if they reach adulthood without ever experiencing meanness, they're walking completely blind into a bear trap.
Because in a loving, hyper attentive home, you just don't typically encounter pure jealousy driven spite.
Your parents aren't trying to sabotage you.
Hopefully not. So if you don't see malice at home and you don't see malice on your screens,
You literally do not possess the vocabulary for it.
you don't know the word for the thing that is about to attack you.
The author says that when this sheltered person inevitably hits the real world and someone is just plain cruel to them for no logical reason, they simply will not understand the concept of what is happening.
And that cognitive void, that complete lack of understanding, is where the real psychological danger takes root.
It's a tragedy, really.
It is profoundly tragic because these sheltered adults don't understand the fundamental nature of external irrational malice.
So when someone is toxic toward them, their brain attempts to make sense of the interaction using the only tools it has.
Right. And since they lack the concept of this person being a malicious bully, they automatically internalize the toxicity.
They assume I must be the one at fault.
Exactly. They rationalize it by thinking, well, the world is fair, so if this person is treating me terribly, I must have subconsciously done something to deserve it.
Oh, wow. So their spirit is broken, sometimes irreparably, because they take on the full psychological burden for someone else's toxic behavior.
Exactly.
That is utterly fascinating. Without the concept of an external villain, you are forced to become the villain in your own story just to make the math work in your head.
That's a brilliant way to put it. It reframes watching television from this passive, mind numbing childhood activity into a crucial active training ground.
Fission acts as a psychological flight simulator for the human soul,
Yes, the Japanese term the author leans on here is Giji Taken.
which translates to simulated experience, right?
The author firmly believes that the enemies and rivals of Showa era entertainment functioned exactly as this necessary simulator.
Preparing children for the harsh, unavoidable realities they would undoubtedly face as adults.
By feeling that genuine unpleasantness, that pit in their stomach while watching TV, the child learns a fundamental truth about human civilization.
That this type of behavior actually exists.
It's not a myth. It's not a misunderstanding that can just be talked out over coffee.
Real, intentional, irrational cruelty is out there, operating in the world.
Yes.
Okay, I hear that, but I really have to wonder about the practical application of the simulation.
What's your hesitation?
Well, does watching a cartoon bully actually teach a kid how to win a fight?
Ah, I see.
Or, like, how to perfectly dismantle a bully's psychological manipulation in the schoolyard?
Right. Because fiction usually resolves neatly.
Exactly. Even harsh show of fiction resolves relatively neatly in a 22-minute runtime.
The hero eventually wins, the bully is defeated, credits roll.
But reality doesn't adhere to a broadcast schedule. Bullying in real life can be chronic, subtle, and incredibly difficult to resolve.
Very true.
So, how useful is the simulation if the resolution it offers is inherently simplified?
You're hitting on a very vital nuance in the author's argument here.
Am I? Okay, clarify it for me.
The author actually clarifies that they do not expect the anime to act as a literal how-to manual for conflict resolution.
Oh, so it's not tactical training.
No, the simulated experience isn't designed to teach a child the perfect verbal comeback to a toxic person.
Or how to win a physical altercation.
Right. The real underlying value of this simulation is simply recognition.
Recognition, okay.
The author notes that even if the child cannot perfectly cope with the bullying in real life,
Even if they freeze up or lose the argument.
exactly, even if they don't know what to say, simply knowing that this specific archetype of human exists gives them a distinct superpower.
What's the superpower?
It allows them to recognize the situation for what it is, and importantly, it grants them the psychological permission to choose to run away or escape.
Oh, wow. So the goal of the simulation isn't to train the child to stand their ground and be a stoic hero in the face of abuse.
No, it's about knowing when you are in the presence of a predator.
It's about recognizing the shape of the threat so you can remove yourself from its proximity.
Exactly. It externalizes the threat entirely.
That makes so much sense.
If you can look at a coworker and recognize them as a giant,
The brute force tyrant from Doraemon.
right? Or recognize a manipulative frenemy as an Eliza from Candy Candy.
You realize the problem is them, not you.
Therefore, you don't need to stay in the situation and try to fix yourself to appease them.
You just need to remove yourself from their sphere of influence.
This represents a massive paradigm shift from the internalized guilt we discussed earlier.
It really does. The simulation gives you the mental scaffolding to categorize toxic behavior correctly.
Preventing it from burrowing in and destroying your own self-worth.
Okay, so recognizing the threat is step one of the simulation.
Right.
But the real emotional payoff, the part that makes the simulation actually stick in a child's developing brain.
The part that makes it a permanent, useful memory.
Yeah, that's how these stories ultimately resolve the conflict. And the Showa era did not mess around with its resolutions.
No, they went incredibly hard.
The author spends significant time discussing the feeling they got when these horrible villains were finally defeated.
Or genuinely reconciled with the protagonist in some rarer cases.
Right. They describe it as a deeply refreshing, crystal clear feeling.
The psychological skies parted.
But the journey to achieve that feeling was incredibly intense.
To understand the depth of that catharsis, we have to look at the specific examples the author provides.
Like their incredibly vivid memories of the wrestling anime Tiger Mask.
Yes, the context surrounding the Tiger Mask example is absolutely vital for understanding this perspective on catharsis.
Because the author intentionally contrasts the ending of the original comic book with the ending of the anime adaptation.
Which they watched on television as a 9-year-old in the 4th grade.
Let's dissect this difference because it completely blew my mind when I read it.
It's a stark contrast.
So, in the original comic ending, the hero, Naoto Date, who wrestles as Tiger Mask, dies.
He dies, yeah.
But he doesn't die in the ring. He dies in a tragic, somewhat mundane traffic accident.
While pushing a young child out of the way of a speeding car.
Right. It's sad, it's poignant, it highlights his ultimate selflessness.
But it's an accident. It's a tragedy of circumstance.
But the anime ending. The author says they watched this on primetime television as a 9-year-old.
And the anime opted for a completely different route.
Completely different. It featured a brutal, agonizing 5-minute public execution of the Tiger's Cave boss.
The ultimate overarching villain of the series.
And we aren't talking about a flashy, sanitized energy beam that makes the villain disappear in a puff of smoke.
No, we are talking about a visceral, prolonged, bloody street fight disguised as a wrestling match.
It involved improvised weapons. They used desks, they used telephone wires to choke each other.
An iron gong.
Yes. It culminates with the boss being hung upside down from a ceiling light fixture.
Screaming in absolute, unvarnished agony.
While the hero essentially commits a very public murder in the ring due to all the fouls.
And again, this was broadcast during a time slot specifically targeted at children.
By modern broadcast standards, an extended sequence of torture and execution in a children's cartoon is genuinely unthinkable.
It would never air today. Never.
So we have to analyze why this extreme content is cited so prominently and with such reverence by the author.
It isn't cited merely for shock value.
Or out of some nostalgic love for gore.
No, the author is pointing out that this specific piece of media introduced concepts of profound fear and profound suffering to children.
They knew an inescapable physical pain.
The catharsis of defeating evil in the Showa era wasn't cheap.
It wasn't handed to the protagonist simply because they believed in the power of friendship.
Or because they just tried really hard.
The victory was agonizingly hard won.
It cost the hero their secret identity. It cost them their place in Japanese society.
And it involved exposing the child viewer to the terrifying absolute reality of a life and death struggle.
Which brings up a really important psychological question.
Which is how a child's brain actually processes that kind of imagery.
Exactly.
Mm.
How does a 5-minute animated public execution not just irreparably traumatize a 9-year-old?
Right. Why doesn't that induce genuine PTSD?
That is where the concept of the window of tolerance comes into play within the psychological framework of Jijiteiken.
Okay, the window of tolerance. Explain that.
When a child is watching Tiger Mask on their tatami mat, their sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response is certainly spiking.
They are experiencing awe, terror, and stress.
But crucially, their parasympathetic nervous system is simultaneously registering the safety of their physical environment.
Because they're in their own living room.
Right. The threat is safely contained within the glowing box.
Ah, I see.
This allows the child's brain to process profound fear without triggering a real world trauma response.
It stretches their window of tolerance for stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When modern media removes all terrifying stimuli, the child's window of tolerance remains incredibly narrow.
Meaning, even minor real world stressors can completely overwhelm their nervous system later in life. That perfectly explains the mechanism of the vaccine. You get the immune response without the lethal infection.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just Tiger Mask pushing these boundaries. The author layers in other examples that show entirely different facets of this extreme approach to storytelling.
Like the enemy ape man.
Yes, Ape Man. The author argues quite passionately that Ape Man was vastly superior to the globally recognized Astro Boy.
Because Ape Man was essentially an adult protagonist dealing with incredibly complex, morally ambiguous adult problems.
Right. And they highlight one specific manga arc that is just staggering.
The one with the child villain.
Yeah. There's a villain who possesses a super intellect, a massive god complex, and absolute arrogance.
But the catch is that the villain is a 9-year-old child.
A literal child. And during the climax of this arc, a nuclear bomb is launched directly at this child villain's base.
Now, Ape Man, our hero, has a specialized laser that can easily destroy the bomb mid-flight.
But Ape Man doesn't just shoot it and save the day immediately.
No, he actively waits.
He pretends he doesn't know how to stop the missile, and he physically begs the arrogant superchild for help.
He waits until the nuclear bomb is literally seconds away from impact.
Why? Specifically to force this arrogant 9-year-old villain to feel genuine, unfiltered human terror.
Ape Man wanted to completely break the child's psychological arrogance.
To teach him the absolute fear of death before finally intervening to save him.
The psychological warfare occurring in that scene is incredibly dense.
It's a hero intentionally inducing trauma to force a moral awakening.
And it illustrates the author's overarching point perfectly. These stories were emphatically not talking down to children.
They were not treating them as fragile porcelain dolls.
They were deliberately exposing them to the rawest, most abrasive edges of human emotion.
Terror, arrogance, manipulation, and the fear of annihilation.
If we look at yet another example the author provides, the drama Sasurai no Taiyo.
Oh, the one about the two girls who were intentionally switched at birth.
Right, that one shows yet another angle of this emotional complexity.
Because there is a terrifying, deeply malicious nurse character named Michiko.
And she ruins the protagonist's lives out of pure, unadulterated spite.
She is the undeniable architect of their lifelong misery.
Yet eventually, after inflicting all this damage, she is forgiven by the protagonist, Nozomi.
But she isn't forgiven because she suddenly became a good person.
No, she is forgiven because of a single, isolated past kindness she once showed.
Right. So they are demonstrating to a young audience that morality isn't just a simple binary of black and white.
It's incredibly messy.
Someone who does genuinely evil things might have a tiny sliver of good in them.
And the act of forgiving them is shown to be a monumental, painful, and deeply conflicted task.
Not just a simple pleasantry.
If we synthesize all of these examples back to the core concept of poison, we see the full intended picture.
The author's profound insight is that the resolution of a story only feels truly refreshing.
It only provides that deep system clearing catharsis.
Because the enemy was genuinely vile or the situation was genuinely terrifying.
You simply cannot experience the blinding light of a truly satisfying resolution without first wading through the deep, suffocating dark of a terrifying villain.
If the villain is just a misunderstood guy who needs a quick pep talk to change his ways, defeating him doesn't provide the necessary emotional release.
It doesn't trigger the vaccine response that prepares a child's psyche for real-world trauma.
The difficulty of the struggle has to be directly proportional to the depth of the catharsis.
Exactly.
Here is where the author's analysis gets even more expansive, though.
Right, because this necessary exposure to struggle wasn't exclusively limited to fighting malicious bad guys.
It extended into how these shows portrayed the characters fighting against the limitations of their own physical bodies.
The emotional pain of dealing with a villain was mirrored by the physical pain of pushing oneself to the limit.
Which brings us to the Spokon genre.
Spokon is a vital piece of the Showa cultural puzzle.
It's a portmanteau of the Japanese words for sports and kondo, right?
Right. Kondo translates to guts, willpower, or spirit.
And it was an absolutely massive, defining genre of the era.
The author holds up these Spokon shows as another crucial, load-bearing pillar of the Showa simulated experience.
They specifically reference shows like Sign is V.
which was a massively popular live action drama about women's volleyball.
alongside various other dramas centering on judo, kendo, and tennis.
What the author valued so deeply in these Spokane narratives was their inescapable, almost brutal depiction of the reality of physical limits.
These weren't stories where a protagonist simply discovered they had a latent magical ability.
And suddenly won the national tournament with ease? Not at all.
The visual language of Spokane was built on suffering.
Characters were consistently shown sweating
They
profusely,
were shown bleeding onto the court
running completely out of breath, collapsing from exhaustion.
and suffering from chronic, agonizing joint pain.
The narrative rules of the universe were incredibly strict and unforgiving.
If a character pushed their physical body too hard in pursuit of a goal, they got injured.
And these weren't always minor injuries, sometimes they were career ending catastrophes.
The physical toll of ambition was always front and center, completely unvarnished.
I think about how this contrasts with how we consume narratives of success today.
Oh, it's night and day. Today, kids and adults really mostly just see the highlight reel.
Exactly. You scroll through your feed and you see the person holding the trophy,
You see the viral dance routine executed perfectly.
or the teenager who just became an overnight millionaire.
You're presented with the final, polished result, completely divorced from the agonizing process required to achieve it.
But these Show Us Spokane shows force the viewer to sit down every single week and watch the grueling, unglamorous, deeply painful 10,000 hours of practice.
You had to watch the protagonist fail repeatedly
Cry in frustration.
and literally ice their bruised, swollen knees for episodes on end before you ever allowed the satisfaction of seeing them even touch a trophy.
And this observation ties directly into the author's broader underlying concern for the psychological fortitude of the younger generation.
Because if children only ever see the completed success,
If they only consume the sanitized highlight reel,
without ever witnessing the physical pain, the relentless suffering, and the sheer mind numbing exhaustion required to achieve that success, they cannot truly comprehend the joy of achievement.
they develop a completely skewed, unrealistic metric for what success demands.
So, in the same way that sanitized friendly villains leave you completely unprepared for emotional manipulation in the workplace,
Sanitized overnight success stories leave you completely unprepared for the reality of hard work.
precisely.
We could look at the neurological mechanism here, specifically mirror neurons.
Oh, mirror neurons, right.
When a child watches a character repeatedly push through exhaustion, fail, and try again, their brain is simulating that effort.
They're building the neural pathways associated with delayed gratification and grit.
Exactly. Just as the terrifying villains taught emotional reality and the undeniable existence of malice, the intense physical suffering depicted in these Spokane shows taught the unyielding reality of human effort,
It taught that physical and mental limits exist,
that breaking past them is inherently painful.
and that true lasting achievement is always paid for in a currency of sweat and tears.
The author is deeply questioning if modern kids, who are largely lacking these constant depictions of gritty, painful reality in their media diet, are missing a fundamental understanding of human limits.
Because if your media diet tells you that success is supposed to be quick and easy,
You are highly likely to quit the moment your own metaphorical joint pain flares up in the real world.
that is such a powerful thought.
It really is.
Well, we have taken a massive, incredibly deep journey through the psychological and cultural landscape of Showa era television today.
Covered a lot of ground.
Let's pull all these threads together. We started with that vivid image of a kid sitting on a tatami mat feeling genuinely terrible while watching a cartoon bully.
Right?
We explored how a roster of mean characters, the terrifying unvarnished violence like the execution in Tiger Mask,
The complex psychological terror of 8-Man inducing the fear of death in a child
and the agonizing sweat-soaked training scenes in Spokane dramas.
all served a unified critical purpose.
They were not just entertainment. They were vital emotional vaccines for the youth of the Showa era.
Controlled doses of poison designed to build a robust psychological immune system.
The author's core paradox is now entirely illuminated, I think.
They absolutely detest real-world bullying, meanness, and violence.
They know intimately the real pain it causes.
Yet it is precisely because they hate it, and because they understand how profoundly damaging it is in reality, that they desperately hope for a revival of anime and dramas that contain that same old poison.
Because a completely sanitized fictional world, a perfectly clean, sterile room, leaves children completely defenseless and lacking the necessary emotional antibodies when they inevitably step outside and encounter the real thing.
Because critical thinking requires us to look at the dark parts of humanity safely through art, rather than pretending they don't exist until they show up at our doorstep.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over. It builds on everything we've discussed today about the necessity of simulating villains.
A provocative thought.
If we eradicate all the narrative viruses, if we continue to aggressively sanitize our villains in modern storytelling, making them all just misunderstood, giving them highly sympathetic backstories so we feel sorry for them rather than fear them,
Or making them easily defeated with a simple, validating conversation.
are we unintentionally designing a society perfectly suited for real world predators? Could we be creating a societal landscape where the most toxic, manipulative people can thrive completely unchecked simply because we refuse to give the next generation the emotional vocabulary to recognize a true villain when they see one?
If we stop showing our children what the monsters look like in the safety of fiction, we shouldn't be surprised when they don't know how to run away from them in reality.
Keep that in mind the next time you're watching a movie and find yourself thinking the bad guy isn't really so bad. Maybe we actually need the bad guys to be bad. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.